story today is about a prophet, a leader, a singer, negotiator, and apparently an accomplished tambourine player. Hopefully you know who we're going to be talking about. Of course, this is Miriam. And Miriam was probably the sister that was watching Moses and negotiate with the Egyptian princess. So I feel like her negotiating skills might have been pretty good. We don't really know how old she was. It doesn't say. Aaron was 3 years older. We know that from Exodus 7:7. And so Miriam was apparently older than Aaron. So she was probably, maybe 7 to 12, maybe somewhere in that range. Moses, of course, leaves Egypt around 40 and works as a shepherd for about 40 years. During this time, God calls him after Moses is about 80. And Aaron apparently is coming out to meet him. So he and Aaron get together. God convinces the Pharaoh to release the Hebrews and let them go. Of course, they leave, but he changes his mind and sends his army after them. God parts the Red Sea, the army's in there, and everything collapses on them. When that happens, we have Miriam's reaction in Exodus 15:20. Is that Miriam, who is called the prophetess, and a sister of Aaron, took a tambourine and brought all the women together to praise God after they made it past the Red Sea and escaped from the Egyptians. The final mention of Miriam in the Old Testament is with the prophet Micah, who talks about the fact that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam were the leaders during this time period of wandering in the wilderness. And we have a couple of stories about Miriam at this point, but that's how she's remembered, and being the leader during this time period of transition from being slaves to being a free people. So during this period of wandering in the wilderness, we know that Miriam and Aaron and Moses led the people. And Miriam and Aaron apparently got together and they had some concerns during one period with Moses' leadership. And apparently it started about this woman who's a Cushite. Now, some people would say that this was a description of Zipporah, which was his wife, and that Miriam was trying to defend her. And there's some ideas that Moses might have had a second wife, because, of course, the Hebrews and Moses' law allowed polygamy. Or, we don't really know. There's not a lot of details given. You can read the passages for yourself. But they started a contention about Moses, saying that we're also prophets. God has also spoken through us. And the Lord heard what they were trying to do. He chastises both of them for it. He comes down in a cloud and he pulls Moses and Miriam and Aaron out. In the cloud, God talks to Moses and Miriam. That's not appropriate. You guys are way out of line. And it's a really great passage, so I hope you take some time to read it. But when the cloud went away, after God was angry with them, and part of being angry with them, so when she came down with leprosy and Moses and Aaron saw it, they were distraught because they loved her. And so they prayed to God and they asked God to heal her. God agrees to their petition to heal her. Miriam is going to need to be outside the camp for 7 days because of these transgressions. So Miriam is out 7 days and then Miriam is healed. And that appears to be something that Miriam took and continued to be a leader, because there doesn't seem to be any other contention between the three of them that we read about. By the time we get to Numbers 20, we have Miriam's death. And they came to the wilderness and Miriam died and was buried there, and the people stayed there and mourned her death. After her death, there's a problem, and this is actually discussed in the next verse. There's no water. Some traditions link the two. Some people would say that Miriam is a symbol of water for the people. It doesn't really say that in the scriptures, but there is this verse right after. So this is Numbers 22. There was no water. But because there was no water, this is where Aaron and Moses are going to bring water. God tells Moses what to do, to go up and to speak to this rock, and they would have water for the people. And of course, this is where Aaron and Moses both sin. Because of this sin, they're not allowed into the promised land. And I just think it's interesting that after they've lost their sister is when Moses and Aaron sinned. There was some potential that they were grieving. Satan is opportunistic. When you're grieving or you have other issues that you're down, then that's an opportunity that he used for Moses and Aaron. And so they sinned at this point. Of course, they were not allowed into the promised land. Aaron died a few verses later in verse 24. When I think of Miriam, I think of someone who was courageous. She was the one that went out there and did something. She helped Moses as a baby. She helped Moses as an adult. She was a leader. We know that from how she's remembered. That's what Micah talks about in the very end when he talks about Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. That Miriam was one of the leaders. She did create discord, so she wasn't perfect, and that's probably not unusual for any leader. But when she was chastised, she was healed. And we don't have any other record that she didn't take that and do better after that. And the fact that when she died, she was loved tells you that that's something about that person when they're loved after they're gone, that they brought something to everyone that they were with. This story reminds me of the fact that our impact isn't always appreciated until sometimes when we're gone. And I think Miriam possibly was one of these people that after she left or after she died, her brothers really missed her. And that's when they were grieving that Satan had an opportunity. Sometimes it may not seem like we have an impact. We probably have a greater impact than we realize.